God, there's so many sports on today. All right, friends. Good morning. Happy Saturday here from Awesemo.com. This is College Football Live Before Lock, presented by Prize Picks. You guys know the drill. Week 12 upon us. Season winding down. College basketball started. There is sports on sports on sports. I am Ben Raza. I am joined, as I always am, by my friend and co-host, Matt Gajeski. I know you must be all in these days. A lot of sports. You've been going to Marquette games. How are you on this Saturday?
Been to two Marquette games, but I'm doing well.
Good.
I'm excited. I don't know if we're going to go that far yet, playing Illinois without Kofi, and then West Virginia, a depleted team compared to what we had last year. And then they played like SIU Edwards well. So I'm not willing to anoint Marquette the next team in the Big East, but you never know. I'm excited for football today. There's a lot of really good games.
We'll see what they do against the Bonnies. That will be a test, but enough about that. We got 14 games on this college football slate. Not a ton of, honestly, marquee matchups. Some big competitive games for the college football playoff picture, but they're also big spreads, and we're going to dive into that and more. We're going to get things started as we always do here with our friends at Prize Picks. If you have not been over there, you definitely want to go take advantage. They're running fantastic offers, and once again, they have a format that you may have not played and that you want to take advantage. Player prop based. You're going to get guys, you're going to get a projection. You're going to say, are they going over or under? You're going to pick 2, 3, or 4 players on the board. So you go 5 for 5. You're going to get up to 10 extra money. And of course, college football is here, but they've got other sports. They've got the NFL. They've got hoops, esports, anything that you want. They have contests. PGA, we do it all the time over there. Download the App Store or on Google Play. Make your first deposit using that promo code Awesemo. You're going to instant deposit match of up to $100. I know, Matt, that you've been killing it over there. A lot of people in our Discord have been having success. I'm going to get things started with a Prize pick, and it's going to a game that I already bet in West Virginia. Letty Brown's rushing yards are at 98.5. Texas is outside the top 100 in rushing defense. I think that West Virginia is going to run wild on the Longhorns today.
Yeah, I think so too. It's like Letty's best matchup of the year since non-con play. They played Long Island. So Letty, for the first time, faces a defense. And the Big 12 quietly is really good defenses, especially against the run, like Baylor, Oklahoma State, and now Texas is allowing over 200 yards per game. They've been gashed on the ground by basically everybody this year. I don't think the offensive line for West Virginia is any good, but finally they're getting a cupcake matchup, which they haven't had recently.
No doubt. I think that we're going to get into that game, and Texas is just so depleted. The second pick, I just wanted to put this out there. I mean, I think you could probably go other directions, but if you want to play a weird one, Stetson Bennett, his passing touchdowns is at 2 right now, and they're 52-point favored. So you'd say, oh, you got to go over. I actually lean under. When they beat Vanderbilt by 60, he had 1. I honestly don't know why Georgia would throw at all. I don't even know why he would get any work. They are playing Charleston Southern today. I mean, you would just have to assume that Georgia's starters are out of this game almost immediately, right?
Yeah, I saw some other ones yesterday, and they pulled some off, so I'm not sure if they're still available, but like Brock Bowers and some of these receivers were projected in like the mid 40s for receiving yards. I think that's a sharper move because they already use like a nasty timeshare. So in good matchups, they don't even project that high. But you mentioned this particular matchup against Charleston Southern. Like, what are the chances Bowers even plays like 30% of the snaps? I think it's pretty low. That's where I would rather go over Bennett, because Bennett could have 2 drives, throw 2 touchdowns immediately, kill you, whereas Brock probably is off the field.
Very true. That is fair. I do think it's just something to take advantage of. And again, that's one of the fun things about Prize Picks. You're going to get some guys that aren't normally on the slate, a little against the grain, a little different. So go and check that out. We'll certainly be talking about them throughout the show because a lot of value and a lot of guys relevant to the slate. We got 14 games. Let's hit that like button. Let's do our thing. I know everybody's ready, and here we go. Wake Forest going to Clemson. Clemson's a 4-point favorite, over under of 57. Big time matchup in the ACC. I mean, Wake Forest answers basically every challenge. I know they dropped 1, but Hartman and this team, Perry, you've mentioned these guys a ton. I assume you think that even in a game like this with Clemson's defense, that Wake will be able to move the ball and these guys have some value.
Yeah, bet the over at 56 earlier this week. And Wake Forest has been able to score on everybody. They have not been able to defend, which is their main issue, and why I think the over is a solid play here. For DFS, Hartman's just far too cheap in this particular matchup. They've played a bunch of easy matchups, propelling him above 300 yards per game pretty easily. And he's been more mobile this year. It's just he's walking into a more difficult matchup. Clemson has a very good pass defense, despite what the numbers may say. And On a per attempt basis, they're very good. I should say that. But overall, Hartman in a somewhat depressed game environment here, I think he's a little bit risky. They're still not going to have Christian Beal-Smith, it looks like. So Justice Allison, Christian Turner should split the work. They're a little more interesting, but there's just so much value that I don't think either are particularly strong plays, just GPP viable. Then the receivers, A.T. Perry and Jacare Roberson are solid. Roberson left last week's game. He only had 2 targets and played 30% of the snaps. Wake Forest is a steel trap for injury information, so we're just not going to know if Roberson's healthy until he's out there for warmups, and then you run the risk of him being limited. So Roberson, I would rather play Perry today. If Roberson's out, it would be Taylor Moore stepping up, but I think those guys are GPP viable. On the Clemson side, Yuan Galilei is extremely cheap on FanDuel. He's a pretty good value over there, but there's a lot of value overall today, so I'm not sure I need to get to him. I'm expecting Clemson to run the ball a lot, particularly because they're down their top 4 receivers. Justin Ross, Joseph Nada, Frank Ladson, Braden Galloway are all out of this game, which means you have some really cheap value in like a Bo Collins, a Dockery Collins. But ultimately, I think they run the ball a lot. They held out both of their premier backs in Will Shipley and Kobe Pace last week against UConn, just precautionary. Shipley's been the lead back when he's healthy. He's just been hurt on 2 separate occasions. But Wake Forest allowing over 200 yards per game. If I'm playing anyone in this game, it would be Shipley.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to ask you. Obviously, Wake Forest has been gashed on the ground all year. You just assume that it was more a luxury considering they played UConn and that he'll be good to go today?
Their coach straight up said that. And we can't take everything that coaches say like word for word. Speaking of Sonny Dykes last week for SMU saying he was going to play Preston Stone and he did not. But Dabo straight up said like Shipley was available, Pace was available. They just didn't play because speaking of which, just got a tweet notification. Roberson's warming up. So that's positive for GPPs. I think he's live now. But they straight up said Shipley didn't play because it was UConn.
Yeah, and I think that is definitely the way to attack. You mentioned Wake is almost 80 plays a game, extremely fast. They've scored on everyone. You got me on that over as well. So definitely a good game to get us started. Not the highest total out there, but just a solid one. And you mentioned that running game. Let's keep it moving. We got Florida State and BC. I bet this game. I bet Boston College, 55.5 point total. We'll start with the FSU side. I mean, I'm not going to anoint them back, but I do give them credit. Beat Miami. They're coming along, and Jordan Travis has been better than I thought he would be. What does that do for him here? And what does this do with the Noles offense? Is this a team you're looking to target?
Yeah, another game I took the over early in the week, took it at 54. It's now up to 55.5. Florida State, they have a pretty strong matchup. They like to run the ball, obviously, with Travis, and that's how you beat Boston College. They're strong secondary, but very weak against the run. So Corbin, I think he should have some efficiency. Unfortunately, he's in a 3-way timeshare, so he's not the best play. But Travis is somewhat viable as a naked option at quarterback. I don't really ever want to stack him. If I did, it would be with Ontario Wilson, but he's only averaging 3.8 targets per game over their last 4. On the other side, DraftKings sleep at the wheel this week. They missed a ton of pricing. So Jurkovec is the min. He's the starter, and he's way more efficient than Grosso. We saw Boston College play far different football with Jurkovec last year. They passed the ball 53% of the time. They were well over 70 plays per game. They haven't even been close to either of those marks this year because Grosso is basically a game manager. But Jurkovec is mobile. He already has nearly 200 rushing yards, and he's only played in 4 games. And he's averaging 186 passing yards on just 15 attempts. So the efficiency is way higher with Jurkovec. At the minimum, he's like a stone cold lock for cash games. I think you can play him in tournaments because most people are going to run him out naked if you want to stack a Zay Flowers or a Jaden Williams, even a Trey Berry who came back from injury. None of them are expensive. And they lost CJ Lewis earlier this year. He had been kind of a cog in the offense that was using like a rotational basis, bringing off like Jaden Williams and Jalen Gill, but now they're all playing every snap. So Zay Flowers is your like alpha, but Jaden Williams, Trey Berry, and Jalen Gill, none of whom are expensive. I think you could see the pass rate jump up for this team, and stacks are viable here. And then in the run game, like Pat Garwo, he worked well ahead of Sinkfield and Levy last week. The issue with Garwo all year has been pass catching. He only has 3 targets. So if Boston College gets down in this game, Garwo runs the risk of being phased out. But he had 24 carries last week, 30 carries the week before. They're not using Levy or Sinkfield anymore in that capacity. So close game, I think he has some upside.
Yeah, we had a couple questions on that very topic. So, you mentioned the price point with Jurkovec. He's going to be popular, and I get that. Definitely cash viable. We had a super chat, and we appreciate it, saying, is the fade reasonable? You mentioned this game script. Say Boston College is able to get up early. Is it possible they just lean on Garwo and Jurkovec just have a mediocre output? Can you go that route, particularly in GPPs? I assume you'd be okay with that.
Yeah, there's so many great quarterbacks on today's slate. And even in the cheaper range, like you have Clifford against Rutgers, you have Jordan Travis on the other side, you have Aiden O'Connell who throws the ball at one of the highest rates in college football. I'll tell you straight up, I'm playing him in cash. I'm running 80 tournament lineups today, and I have Yurkovich in 68%. So not a complete fade. And it depends on how many lineups you're running. If it's like anywhere between 1 and 3, sure. If you're running like 20 plus, I would have some of them.
Anything else from this game?
I don't think so. I think one way to be contrarian with Yurkovich is stacking him.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned that the tempo can pick up. That's why you like the over. I like BC in the game. So I hope they just score 60 on their own and we'll be just fine.
Like, yeah, Zay Flowers is 100 less than Garrett Wilson. Like, people aren't going to play him. And there's so much value on today's slate that just expect people to jam in like Roshan, the cheap backs. And there's a couple other cheap receivers that are really popping in projections too. So you're going to obviously sacrifice some projection playing a Jaden Williams, a Barry, or a Gill, but you're getting that back in what should be a lower owned spot for the stack. I think Yurkovich naked is going to be the most popular way to run him today.
Iowa State and Oklahoma, my two teams that I can't get right. 3.5-point favorite for the Sooners. They're at home, 59-point total. Both these teams are coming off losses of various degrees of embarrassment. We always talk about Breece Hall. He will be going up against the teeth of Oklahoma's defense, but as Baylor showed, maybe that's not that big of a deterrent. Where does he fall in this slate at 9,400 and 11,000?
Excuse me, who were we talking about? Breece Hall?
Yeah, Breece Hall. You think he's in play here?
Yeah, I think he is in play because there's so much value. Like, there's no issue paying up for him today. Normally when slates are tight, that's where you have the opportunity cost. The only issue is, like, do you pay up for expensive receivers or play up for Breece? I do have some of Breece in tournaments. I think this is a sneaky game. A lot of people perceive Iowa State to be this really slow, run-heavy team, and they've changed in recent weeks. And I credit to Campbell. He's finally realized it only took him half the year, but they're not having any success running the ball. Breece is still getting all of the volume. So when they do run, like, the volume's not in question, but it has been down lately. He's had 20 carries or less in 3 of the last 4, which is far down from his season average. So I would rather get to other backs, but if Iowa State goes up in this game, Breece Hall is going to handle probably like 25 to 30 carries. It's just a matter of how this plays out. I think Purdy's live for stacks too, because they've been throwing more. He's been extremely efficient this year and he's somewhat mobile. So stacks of Purdy are live. Hutchinson and Kohler are the two options you look to. And Kohler just has an egregious price compared to Hutchinson. He's $3K cheaper on DraftKings, and he has essentially the same target volume on the year. And again, Kohler missed their first game. So you see 80 targets season long for Hutchinson, 68 for Kohler. Like, you normalize this with the same amount of games played. They basically have the same target volume. Hutchinson probably a little more upside, but I mean, is that worth 3K to me? No, it's not. I will just stack Purdy with Kohler. And there's options you can use on the other side too, with a good game environment.
Yeah. So that's, you mentioned Kohler, Purdy on the other side of the game. I mean, first question, do you worry about Caleb Williams and Rattler kind of cannibalizing each other? Do you think it's still Williams? What's the situation with this team? Obviously they were searching for answers in a desperate situation late in the game. Where are they at now going against Iowa State's defense?
Yeah, so we talked on Wednesday, and I initially, I can't watch every single college football game. There's just too many. So I didn't catch the Oklahoma game last week, but I saw Rattler came in, and I assume Williams got benched. I went and Caleb Williams got his hand stepped on. That's true. Lincoln Riley said it was injury related. But again, do I trust Lincoln Riley at this point? Especially no. So I don't know. If Williams plays bad, I think you could see Rattler. So at nearly 10K, you're just running with a lot of risk here with Williams. Good dual threat. He's impossible to stack. So that's another reason why I don't like him as much. Like, I think you could get a lot more upside by stacking Stroud or Pickett or Bryce Young. But Williams, I mean, they're not even using Marvin Mims. He's averaging 3 targets per game over the last 4. Hasn't seen more than 3 other than on just one occasion. Hazelwood has the most target volume, but he's just like fancy Jarvis Landry for Oklahoma. It's really hard to stack him. If I am playing anyone on the Sooners, it's Kennedy Brooks, who has functioned as the lead back and the bell cow when they've been able to play in positive game script. They're 3.5-point favorites here. Again, Iowa took a ton of money early in the week, so perhaps they get it done outright. But Kennedy Brooks, I think, is a decent option on the other side. If you run like a Purdy Kohler stack, using Brooks as a contrarian option over there makes some sense. He just doesn't catch you to passes either, which is tough.
Last question for this game. Brandon asked, is Noel a good GPP play if you're using Purdy?
I think you can. You're giving up a lot of projection here because he's not really like a full-time player. They rotate in Milton in Wilson and Skates and Shaw, but I think you could in really large field stuff.
I know society is probably wondering if I bet Oklahoma, as I say I'm going to do every week. I haven't yet. I don't know if I'm going to. The spread keeps dropping. I'm undecided. If you want all our picks, me and Matt, we have our card. It is available behind the paywall or in our Slack. You just type in picks, populates college football, college basketball. It's been a really fun time. Oklahoma, I'm not sure if they're going to make that card. We will just have to wait and see. I'll tell you what did make my card is West Virginia, my favorite bet of the week. 2.5-point favorite. It's held in Morgantown, 56.5-point total. What is there to say? Texas is in complete disarray. Bijan is hurt. They lost to Kansas. They have two quarterbacks. Can you get anything from this offense? Obviously, Worthy has been fantastic. Is he a priority for you today, or are you just saying Texas is in such shambles, I don't want anything to do with this team?
I think Worthy is a good GPP play. There's just so many good options. Like, he's more expensive than Garrett Wilson. Like, he's 100 less than David Bell. There's just players in much better game environments, but Worthy has immense upside. Like, he had 23 targets in last week's overtime game. Overtime aside, like, he probably finishes that game with 19, 20 targets if it stays in regulation. But I don't think it's quarterback roulette anymore. Hudson Card played so poorly that Sarkisian basically said they're not going to use him at all anymore. It's Thompson. But at the same time, like, I don't know what this team does. They did not commit to Casey Thompson. And when he was kind of the clear starter midseason, they really just took the air out of the offense. They just slammed the ball up the middle with Bijan, which worked really well because Bijan's just an elite talent. Now without him, do they try to run? Do they force the ball to Roschon? Do they feed Xavier Worthy the 23 targets because he's the best player? I just don't know. They certainly don't trust Thompson. And you do run the risk of, like, Jordan Whittington coming back, stealing some targets from Worthy. I think there's enough risk there where I'm just going to play the other elite receivers like Wilson, Bell, Dotson. And then in the run game, we need to play Roschon Johnson, at least in like cash games, because he's so cheap. I think it could be somewhat of a split between him and Keelan Robinson. Robinson missed last week's game because of an illness. But Roschon, former quarterback, good pass catcher. All indications are that he's going to be the lead back. Again, I don't know what the split is, but I would anticipate at least 60-40, if not like a 70-30 split. And at 3.8K, you just can't really find enough value other than that. Like, he's the best value play on the board, especially because he catches balls. Like, he had 5 targets last week.
No doubt about it. They're going to have to do something. And on the other side, we've talked a little about Letty Brown. I like him in prize picks, but I just like him in all formats. He is 6,200. He does figure to be pretty popular today. I would say it's warranted. Is he cash viable? And what do you do with him in tournaments?
I think Letty's cash viable. He's somebody I think you could get away from depending on your build. If you're punting, running back twice, or paying up twice, Letty's kind of in that mid range, and he's the preferred play there. Volume secure. Like, they just don't feed other running backs the ball whatsoever. And Letty finally has a good matchup. We talked about it at the beginning of the show, but Texas allowing over 200 yards per game to opposing rushers. That's why I would rather just play him than get to the quarterbacks. Like, Garrett Green is back, so you're going to see him siphon snaps from Deggy in the receiving game. The only thing to watch potentially is Isaiah Esdale and Sean Ryan are both questionable. I haven't got a notification on them, but if they're both out, that could condense opportunities for Sam James and make you get another contrarian value play below 4K. So he's just a name to watch.
On prize picks, your boy Daggy, his rushing yards prop is -5.5.
I'm going to cross-reference this with my projections and see what I have on him.
This is important. He's coming off a nice game where he had, so in his last 2 games, he had -15 and -35. It seems like you want to go under -5.5 here.
Let's see here. I can't find his projection just off the top of my head. He projects for -4 for me. So I guess over. Okay. Yeah, limit those sacks. I really just think that West Virginia, not that they're a good team, but just will find a way. Texas has given up a ton of yards on the ground. And as you see there, they've got a 1-2 punch with Letty Brown being in the positives and then their quarterback being in the negatives. I actually hope they go to Green a little and let him run because he actually can run. But enough about that. West Virginia, lay the points, target Letty Brown. Let's keep it going here. As we move on to another game, we've got Purdue and Northwestern. It's not the best game on the slate. Obviously, Purdue's 11-point favorite. Over under is just 47.5, but there is a true alpha and probably a very popular stack or pairing, in my opinion, with Aiden O'Connell and David Bell. Both look pretty popular today. Is the Purdue stack a preferred target for you, or are you going elsewhere? Yeah, it's a great GPP, I think, option. O'Connell, he throws the ball so much that he's just going to backdoor his way into a lot of 300-yard games. He's averaging 275 on the year. You do run the risk of them just blowing out Northwestern, but it's only a 10.5-point spread. So it looks like Northwestern's going to hang around at least a little bit. David Bell is averaging 14.3 targets per game over the last 4. He's easy cash game play. And I think you can run him in tournaments with O'Connell because I think a lot of people are going to use him just by himself. A lot of people will probably try to play Yurkovich and pay up for their second quarterback. So you're going to run into a lot of just David Bell solo lineups. If you stack him with O'Connell, it's another way to get contrarian with the stack itself. And also you could use other receivers in this offense too. You can use Milton Wright, Jackson Anthrop, even Payne Durham, the tight end. He returned from injury last week, so target volume's depressed. Before his injury, he was the second most targeted pass catcher on the team. Even he's fine. In the run game, this is a spot where I think you could take shots too. Xander Horvath and King Doru splitting work 50-50. In their last game with super positive game script three weeks ago, Doru 17 carries, Horvath 11, and Northwestern allows over 250 rushing yards per game.
Yeah, we had a question on that. Like with the passing game being so popular, can you go to King Doru maybe as a leverage spot and hope that maybe all the touchdowns just happen to be on the ground?
Yeah, I have some of that. I'm going to pull up my exposures again, see how much. I don't have a lot of Doru, but I do have a little bit.
Anything on the other side? Obviously, Northwestern is just bad. They're hurting. They got a team total of 19 implied total. It's not great. Anything from them?
Not much. Hull splits time with Andrew Clare. They're platooning their quarterbacks. They're going to use Marty and Helinski this week. If you're using a run back to a stack or something, Stephon Robinson, the Kansas transfers, their most targeted receiver, just not a lot of upside with a 19 implied team total here. So that's reserved for very large GPPs. The same goes for Malik Washington's the wide receiver too.
I think this game is at, not that this matters, I'm pretty sure this game is at Wrigley Field.
I did not know that.
I think that could just be made up, but if it is true, I'm the one that said it. Anyway, that's not important. Yeah, confirmed. Man behind the glass gave me the thumbs up. Wrigley Field. Also, as if there wasn't enough college sports, as you see on the screen, if you're into some hoops and you want to make some money, you want to grind college basketball, Awesemo plus CBB for $5 for a week with the promo code Coach K. That was before half his team was arrested, but still, we're running that promo. We've got it for the week. You can do that. Matt does a fantastic job with all of that, a big time edge, and you get all the betting content as well. So if you're looking to get into some of the hoops, use that promo code. It is expiring coming up, so you want to do that today. No doubt about it. Great value. This is the big time matchup, Matt. Michigan State, Ohio State, but it's upwards of a 20-point spread. So clearly the books are not saying that they expect Michigan State to be able to go in there and hang. What are we doing here with this Spartan team? We had a message chat, add more funds, good people. Naylor there, but not suited up in sweats. Does that solidify, obviously, the alphas on the outside without him? What do you make of this Michigan State team?
Yeah, Michigan State's never going to be a team that gives you injury news, but Naylor has a cast on his hands. I mean, the only person I've ever seen play with a cast in football is Keaton Thompson. We can talk about him later, but I mean, usually receivers don't play with casts on their hand. Jaden Reed's a phenomenal option without him. Over 10 targets in every game. That Naylor's been out or limited. He's still too cheap based on the role here. The only thing you're worried about is efficiency. And Trey Mosley stepped up ahead of Monterey Foster this past week, which was positive. They seem to rotate their receivers behind Trey Mosley a little bit last week, using some Malik Carr, who's a former Purdue player. They use him as a hybrid wide receiver tight end. It's going to be just Reed or Mosley for me there. And you can always get to Walker. We've seen Walker in some of these games with negative game script still produce. He's now been targeted out of the backfield a decent amount, which gives you some confidence that if Ohio State blows Michigan State out, that Walker could still be involved. We saw that against Michigan, which was really positive. So I like Walker as a contrarian play. He's much more affordable on FanDuel, so I think you can get to more of him over there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the game script, you got Kenneth Walker at 92. I just want to go back to Breece Hall. Like, if you were going to one of them, where would you, if it was Walker versus Hall?
I would play Breece. We just got some big news in the game we already talked about. From Wake Forest, no Justice Ellison in addition to Christian Beal-Smith. Yes, so Christian Turner's 3,400. He's going to see all the work.
Cash viable?
Yeah, cash viable for sure. He's going to probably split time a little bit with Quinton Cooley and Amani Marshall, but I mean, those guys only play in severe blowouts. Christian Turner's 3,400. He's 5,200 on FanDuel. He's looking at a workhorse role now. I don't know how I'm going to pivot. I have 80 lineups, but we're going to try to make something work.
Well, you go do that, and I'm going to talk a little about Ohio State here. who are the favorite. Obviously, they've got a very, very high implied total, 44 points here. And what can we say? Stroud is making himself Heisman relevant. He's got just absolute playmakers across every facet of this offense. You've got Henderson in the backfield. He's 8,500. So you're talking about, $500 to $1,000 savings off the guys like Breece Hall, off Kenneth Walker and them. And then you've got just an embarrassment of riches on the outside. Smith and Jigma, who is the most expensive now by a pretty wide margin, Matt. You've got Wilson, you've got Olave, Rutgers. So just talk to me about Ohio State. When you're expected to score, 6-7 touchdowns, where does that distribution fall? Obviously, Stroud in the stack is in play, but how many receivers do you want with him? Talk more about the lineup construction, because we know all these guys are top end players.
Stroud, you could play one or two pass catchers, fine with either. They're all expensive, but that doesn't matter on this slate. There's no salary restrictions. You can play whoever you want with him. I prefer Wilson. Wilson would be the most targeted receiver on the team, and he would probably tie Smith and Jigba, be close to him in receiving yards if he didn't miss that game. Smith and Jigba just had that monstrous game when Wilson was out, that 18 target game. He's over 1,000 yards, but I still think Wilson's the number one. He's the preferred. I'd go to Smith and Jigba number 2, Olave 3. He's just a possession receiver at this point, but he still has a pretty good chance of breaking the slate if he gets the volume. Henderson's the same thing. And Henderson will be used in a workhorse role if the other team keeps it competitive. I think Michigan State has a better chance of doing that than Purdue. In the 2 previous weeks, we saw Henderson outcarry Mayan Williams 28-3 and 21-1. Master Teague is back, but Master Teague is like an equipment manager at this point.
That's harsh and probably accurate.
He's been with the team since I've been in school, and he's not
accurate.
been good at all.
A couple of questions here real quick. Would you play Shipley and Turner together on FanDuel?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do have some correlated lineups. A lot of it is Wake Forest pass game to Shipley, but I'm trying to rework some stuff behind the scenes. So I'm going to have some of that. This is a stance I want to take now that we have this information, because Roschon's going to be like a top 3 on player on the slate. For tournaments, making this pivot, I think, makes a lot of sense.
And is that something in terms of Turner and Johnson? How do you rate those two? Or is it just, top of the board style?
Turner versus Roschon?
Yeah, Roschon.
I think right now Roschon's still probably better because of the pass catching. Turner is just like a major question. He's a Michigan transfer, but we haven't seen him in a workhorse role. I'm not 100% they even give it to him. But for tournaments, I'm still going to, for cash, I'm going to play Roschon. I'm not changing my cash lineup. But for tournaments, I think this is an excellent pivot with the unknown that we've seen. And Christian Turner's been in a 3-way committee with Beal Smith Ellison all year. And last week it was reduced to 2, Ellison and Christian Turner. Now we have just the 1. So there's a chance he handles all the work. There's a chance some of these younger kids split time with him. We just don't know, which makes it a pretty good tournament play.
All right, moving on. We got Rutgers 18-point underdogs going to Penn State, 46.5 point total. Not one of the better games, and certainly not one of the better teams here with Rutgers. One of the lowest implied totals on the slate, 14 and change. Obviously, they don't have a ton going on. Pacheco in the backfield, Bo Melton. Is there anything that you want to talk about with Rutgers, or are they a complete stay away?
Shamin and Bo Melton are pretty decent projected plays, but you just don't need to get to them on this slate with the low total. There's so much value. We just talked about 2 guys at the running back position. There's plenty of receiver value as well. I don't think it makes a ton of sense.
On the other side, though, you did mention that Clifford is also very affordable. They haven't been the best team in the world here, but it's still at times, can be an effective pass catcher, and he's only 6,000, and he has obviously a super alpha. I would assume if you're going to Clifford that you basically have Dotson preloaded in that.
Yeah, I think you could play Parker Washington too. You look at all their target volume for their prices, it's just a little bit too cheap on all of them. So I think you certainly can stack him with Dotson. You run the risk of them just killing Rutgers so bad. But at the same time, Dotson has the second best target volume on the slate behind only David Bell.
Anything else from Penn State? I mean, there are upwards of, almost 3 touchdown favorites. Does that mean that there's someone in this backfield that you think is worth targeting?
Last week, they used Kevon Lee as a pure feature back. They did not use Noah Cain really at all. And then he didn't even have a touch. And then John Lovett did have some pass game work. He finished with 8 touches overall, 4 targets, 4 carries. But John Lovett, he's been one of the least efficient backs in the country, the Baylor transfer. So Kevon Lee wasn't super efficient, but he was still over 4 yards per carry, which isn't something Penn State can boast really throughout the year. Rutgers allows over 150 yards on the ground. So Kevon Lee's another pivot off the Roshan. I think he's probably third in terms of just who I would prefer to play now with Christian Turner available, but he's still a pretty good play because there's such heavy favorites with a great team total against Rutgers. So I do have some of him. I'm looking at changing some of my really cheap backs over to Turner right now. So that includes Kevon Lee, Ulysses Bentley, the Arkansas back, Dominic. Those are going to be the guys I'm trying to switch over.
Yeah, I do think when you have just the opportunity cost and just the plentiful amount of these pay down backs, obviously, some of them are going to get squeezed. And I totally see what you're doing there. As this news broke with Wake Forest, we already had the value with Texas. Mr. Davis, welcome to Team Awesemo. As you guys can see, if you want to get those custom badges, join the team, hit that join button right below. We love seeing that. All right, we got Illinois, we got Iowa. Yes, 38.5, not team total for the game. The Illini are 12.5 point underdogs. Now, this is a game that is just incredibly bad. Is this a straight skip game, or is there something in here that we need to talk about?
There's not much, to be honest with you. The only plays on either side are the backs. Chase Brown worked well ahead of Josh McCray in the last game, 32 carries to 3 carries for McCray. Chase Brown's issue has been pass catching. Like, he's not super involved in the pass game. So if they get down, how does he stay relevant? And oftentimes, like, it just doesn't matter. They're just going to slam him into the back of the O-line, even if they're losing. So he has just immense volume. He's averaging over 100 yards per game on this terrible Illinois team. That tells you how much they're using him. So he's a contrarian option. The same goes for Tyler Goodson. He has pretty decent volume. It's dropped a little bit in recent weeks because he's been so bad. But Tyler Goodson's a much better pass catcher than Chase Brown. So these guys are the only two options just in tournaments, and still probably not getting to either. I have 0% of this game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even going to say anything like trying to be witty or clever. It's just a bad game. We don't have time for that. Iowa's just a disaster. Georgia Tech, I really can't with Iowa. I don't know why they're always on the slate too. Georgia Tech.
DraftKings prioritizes the Power Five.
I know, but they can't find, is there really no other noon games in the Power Five they couldn't get in there? Maybe not.
You're telling me, man. I hate the Big Ten.
Put in Florida Atlantic and Western Kentucky.
Dude, now you're speaking my language.
That's what I'm talking about.
Jarrett Stearns is up for the Bolitnikov, and we never get to see him.
No, sad, very, very sad. Georgia Tech, 17.5 point underdogs. They got Notre Dame here. I didn't even really look at this game, to be honest. What a weird game. It just snuck in there. Talk to me about Georgia Tech. They're one of the teams, obviously. They've made a pretty good transition. A couple of years ago, they were only running the ball, and now they've, certainly moved on. And I think they've actually looked pretty good in the ACC. This is a pretty tough test, though. Where do they fall in priorities? Is there anyone from this team that you think is worth targeting?
If anybody, it would be their running back, Jahmyr Gibbs, because he's such an active part of the pass game. He's averaging 4.8 targets per game over the last 4, nearly 50 yards. He's actually the team's leading receiver. The only other team I can really think of off the top of my head that has that is Kansas State. So Jahmyr Gibbs is a phenomenal role. Notre Dame has defended backs pretty well, so I don't think it's the best matchup. Georgia Tech's down their starting quarterback, which definitely doesn't help, but he gets a lot of volume. On the other side, Kyron has a pretty decent opportunity share here as well. Georgia Tech allows nearly 180 yards to backs. It's just Notre Dame has now shown a willingness to take their foot off the gas and use Chris Tyree and Logan Diggs as a change of pace, especially when the game's out of hand. So if Georgia Tech can keep it somewhat close, Kyron has a big ceiling, but there's just better options.
Anything on the outside, a guy like Austin, he's obviously catching some touchdowns lately, but really not getting a ton of volume. You always got Mayer as well at 56, or they just on a slate this big with 14 games, really not coming up much for you.
Yeah, both middling plays. They almost have a 40-point implied team total. So I did get a little bit of these Notre Dame pass catchers, a little bit of Kyron as well. And it's because Avery Davis tore his ACL. So you have a little bit of volume consolidation between Mayer and Austin. Even like a Braden Lenzy has stepped up as the wide receiver 3. He's 3.3K, but there's just you pay $100 more than you get Turner from Wake Forest right now. So it's not a strong play.
Yeah, again, I mean, I know we're saying the same thing, but the value that opened up has certainly changed the lineup construction. And just looking at, all your data, which is behind the paywall, another thing with your usage sheets, it just becomes clear that a lot of these guys, outside of fringe tournament plays, you're trying to be different. A lot of them just are not in as advantageous positions as some of these other guys. I didn't bet this game. I have no interest in betting this game. Total and spread feel right for me.
Yeah, same with me.
First SEC game. Yeah, first SEC game. Arkansas, 20.5-point dogs going to Bama, 58-point total. Arkansas has clearly the worst schedule in the country. Every time we talk about them, they're playing an incredibly difficult game. So the record is a little misleading. They're a quality team. It's just they're going against the best of the best each and every week. Talk to me about where they're at, with Jefferson. And obviously they try to run the ball, but they fall behind. And then Treylon Burks on the outside.
Yeah, they're going up against an Alabama defense, which has improved. Ultimately, like the run game is really hard to get to right now. Dominique Johnson has worked ahead of Raheem Sanders and Traylon Smith over the last couple games, but it's still been a timeshare. Like, I don't think Dominique Johnson has the backfield locked up. I think it's going to be a little bit of Smith, a little bit of Sanders here and there. You also run the risk of KJ Jefferson being so involved in the run game too, just siphoning off potential touchdowns here. He's the stone min, but again, Christian Turner, he's at 34. Kevon Lee's at 36. Roshan's at 38. We talked about King Doru. He's at 45. Like, I understand he projects well, but now we've had so many other options open up. Like, do you really want to target Dominique Johnson as a 3-touchdown underdog on a team implied below 20 points and a guy that doesn't really catch passes? I mean, Arkansas throws the ball 36% of the time. So he's now become like the 4th or 5th option in that really cheap range for me, rather than like coming into the day, he was 2nd or 3rd.
With the value at the back position, I just kind of want to ask you a macro thing. Are you getting to a lot of running backs in your flex today?
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. So you're going 3 backs, obviously 2 quarterbacks in all lineups, as you need to do for people who may just be getting here, new, a different type of roster construction than the NFL. Let's talk about Bama on the other side. They still have a Heisman contender and Bryce Young. They've got a lot of guys in the backfield. They've been beating up, I don't take much of anything what we saw last week. They were playing New Mexico State. That's just not a game where they're going to show real personnel. So getting back to what they do best, is it still Mechie and Williams on the outside as pairs with Young, or do you see something else worth targeting?
It's basically those two. They rotate their wide receiver 3, and it's not just a wide receiver they use. They'll use Slade Bolden as kind of their typical wide receiver 3, but then they use a lot of Julio Billingsley as a big slot. And then Cameron Latou is their traditional wide receiver 3. And we've seen some other players get involved recently, like Trayshawn Holdens siphoned off a few snaps here and there. I think you run the risk of there just being a nasty timeshare at the 3rd wide receiver spot. So Jamison Williams and John Mechie are the top 2 guys in this offense. With that said, like, they're priced more expensive than David Bell, in the same range as like Dotson, Roberson, A.T. Perry, players that have just far better value. You could live with efficiency through one of these guys, which makes them such good tournament plays. And Bryce Young is stackable for sure. He's averaging over 300 yards per game, and he's a little bit worse in terms of projection compared to like Pickett and Stroud, but he still has a very strong chance of getting there. So I like this stack for tournaments.
If you do go to that stack, are you going to run it back with any of the Arkansas players?
It has to be Burks. Otherwise or I guess Dominique Johnson, because he's the min, but if it's not Burks, you're not playing any other pass catcher. They just rotate so I guess voluminously between them. And Burks is over double the targets of their 2nd most targeted receiver.
All right, we got about 4 games left. We'll try to get in some questions as well if we've got some time. We did just have one. We've talked a lot about low priced running backs. Is there a low priced wide receiver that you think may be cash viable?
Yeah, there's a couple. So I'll name a few. I'll just sort by the projection first and foremost. But so below 4K is what we're doing?
Yeah, just any cheapies. You can do that. And again, it's just another reason, to be honest, why you should sign up for a package and get these projections, because it really helps you out. I know there's so many games, so many moving targets. But yeah, is there any cheapies for the wide receivers that potentially could be cash viable?
Yeah. So I think Parker Washington for Penn State. We just got news that Sean Clifford's not in uniform, which is a concern for everyone there. Yeah. They're doing senior day. He's not in uniform. So it doesn't look like he's going to play. Milton Wright you want to ask me something about that?
I mean, are you going to bet Rutgers?
No.
Okay. Yeah. I don't think I'm going to either, but I'm more tempted. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So at receiver, you have like Milton Wright, Dockery Collins for Clemson, I think is solid. Braden Lindsey for Notre Dame. Malik Washington, I guess, for Northwestern projects fairly well. Dylan Goffney for SMU is filling in for hurt option ahead of him. Shockey Jacques Louis for Pittsburgh. He's the wide receiver 3 now without Taysier Mack. Those would be some names I look at.
Yeah, the Rutgers spread is down to 14. So looks like the markets are reacting. Huh.
Yeah, that's not good. I have a lot of Clifford. I'm going to check how much I have.
Wow, I wish I caught
17% Clifford. So those stacks are looking poor.
If you are a betting person and you can get to your book and you find that Rutgers plus 18, 17, anything like that, you should take it. I don't think they'll be up for long. They might be gone already. Let's move on, though, to SMU and Cincy. This is a huge game. Of course, Cincinnati has zero margin for error, and even if they keep winning, who knows? But this is a decent chance to show some style points. At times, people thought SMU was good. They've got some things. You mentioned the Preston Stone situation. I assume you really can't factor that in today. And even so, is SMU a team that you like here? 27-point implied total. What do you see with the Mustangs going up against Cincinnati?
Yeah, their coaching staff lied, and they didn't play Stone until the end of the game. And this week, they have a much more difficult matchup, a tough game against Cincinnati. This isn't the game they're going to bring them out now. So Mordecai, I think, is in play for a contrarian option. Cincinnati's defense has been good, but they've definitely taken a step back from last year. They've just hung around opponents and let opponents score. Opponents that shouldn't, and opponents that are worse than SMU offensively. So Mordecai is mobile, averages well over 300 per game just on raw volume. And they lost Danny Gray. I don't expect him to play today. So you have Rashee Rice is the one. Calcaterra is their tight end, super cheap on him. He's 4,100. Maybe he's a value, depending on how you categorize values. Roberson's now going to be the wide receiver 2. They're all pretty solid. I like Calcaterra because he doesn't run into the strong corners that SMU has. And we've seen tight ends take advantage of Cincinnati, like Michael Mayer for Notre Dame. So Calcaterra is interesting. The wide receiver 3 should be split between Roderick Daniels and Dylan Goffney. I think both are fine for tournaments.
Anything from the Cincinnati side? Again, they are 10-point favorite here. Pretty healthy total. SMU certainly can be had at times. Is it? I mean, what do? You do you go to Ritter and the pass catchers? Do you go to someone in the backfield? How do you break this up?
I think for Ritter, you can play him naked. He's not really easy to stack unless they get down in games. Alec Pierce is egregiously priced, so he's never somebody I play unless it's just super contrarian. Ford missed their most recent game. I think that's mainly just a precaution. And now he could be back. We just don't know. If he's out, it's a 3-way timeshare, making it really difficult to target. But if Ford is there, it's a good matchup. SMU plays strong run defense for the most part. They're weak against the pass, but I still think you could play Ford based on their implied team total. It's nearly 40 points. Again, that all depends on him being healthy. But I'm also completely fine running Ritter naked because he's so mobile.
So it looks like, just to go back, that Sean Clifford is all right. He is in pads and he is throwing passes. So now
thank goodness I didn't swap yet.
Yeah, I might try to go now and bet Penn State if these lines did the double take. I'm going to do that right now because I don't really know what's going on. We obviously have to keep an eye on it, but it looks like he seems to be good to go now. So we got to talk about that a little bit. And if Dotson, I think Dotson's going to be fine if Clifford's good to go. If not, obviously it would be a downgrade. Real quick, friend of the show, Nick, asked favorite bets today. For me, in addition to what I gave out, it would be Villanova in basketball, Boston College in football. I know you like that over in Wake Clemson. Anything else you want to throw out there real quick?
Not really anything that has value at this point. I bet everything on Monday. So I have Ohio State, or excuse me, I have Iowa State plus 6.5. Like, they're just not games I would bet right now.
But again, your card available inside the glass. You'll be adding to it as the day goes on. Real quick, anything about Brian Robertson? I know we didn't really talk about him. He's just kind of mediocre at best for me.
Yeah, he needs a competitive game to see a ceiling in workload, and I'm not sure we get that from Arkansas. So he's a little bit behind some of the other guys, but tournaments, I think you could roll with it.
Three left. Virginia 14.5-point underdogs going to Pitt, 66-point total. Virginia was just completely lost without their do everything quarterback last week in Notre Dame. What is the status of Armstrong right now, and how do you break down a situation like this?
Virginia steel trapped with injuries. You're not going to know till warmups, but he did throw the ball ahead of last week's game, so I think he has a better chance of playing. And nobody's going to be playing him, so he's a really strong contrarian option. He's also expensive, which means there's pretty easy pivots. Like, you could just 1-for-1 pivot to pick it if Armstrong's out. So I have no issues just slotting him in your lineup for tournaments and waiting to see this news. Obviously, him playing would be great for the game overall. If he's out, the game environment would take a little bit of a hit.
Anything, can you do anything with this? Again, with Armstrong obviously leading at anything. Are there pass catchers that you'll roll with, or is it just we have to see what's going on and then we react accordingly?
Couple injuries on the team as a whole. Talapapa, I'm not sure that's a huge difference maker, but Billy Kemp is also hurt. He left last week's game. He's now left 2 games in a row with an injury. Played through it last week, but their coach wouldn't talk about him this week, so I don't know if he's healthy or not. If Kemp is out, a lot more targets for Keaton Thompson, more targets for Dontavian Wicks, and Rashawn Henry would become a much better value at wide receiver. He would immediately become like one of the better wide receiver plays on the slate if Brennan Armstrong is in and Billy Kemp is out.
On the other side, Pittsburgh, again, really healthy total. They score a lot. They've got a great quarterback themselves. Where does the Pitt stack fall? You know, we've talked about some of these top end guys. Do you see yourself getting to Pickett in the pass catchers?
Yes, a lot of them. They project really well. They're so pass heavy. They're so fast, as is Virginia. This is the premier shootout of the day as long as Armstrong plays. Pickett's mobile. He's throwing the ball efficiently and voluminously. Jordan Addison, he gets a ton of targets. They don't have Taysier Mack right now, so you have some really cheap options in Jared Wayne. Lucas Krull's their tight end, and then their wide receiver 3 will split a little bit of time, but it's Shockey, Jacques Louis. I think all are viable. You can also use Abanaconda, their running back, for tournaments if you're looking for leverage off the Pitt stack. He's not a bell cow, but he's worked ahead of Rodney Hammond and Vincent Davis pretty clearly when he's been healthy, and he catches passes. So I'm interested in Abanaconda he's averaging 4.3 targets per game over the last 4. So you have Virginia allowing over 235 rushing yards per game. There's a good path to Abanaconda getting there too for tournaments.
Anything else from the game? I didn't bet it. Again, it's really hard to bet a game like this because we just don't know the status of Armstrong.
I think we hit everything.
Michigan, Maryland, Michigan 15-point favorites on the road, 57.5-point total. Haskins right now in our ownership projections looks like he might be the number 1 owned player on the entire slate. Do you think that's warranted? Is he cash viable? Obviously, they want to run the ball.
Yeah, playing him in cash. They haven't used the back to rotate with him whatsoever since they lost Blake Corum. 27, 31 carries, pass game role also shot up, 5 targets in their last game. No matter how they get it done, Hassan Haskins is going to be a big part of it. He's too cheap. He should be up there with the Breece Hall in terms of price. He's about 2,000 underpriced here. Maryland also not a good run defense, allowing 164 yards per game. Michigan, 2 touchdown favorite, just lines up for Haskins to be a phenomenal expensive play.
Anything for the pass catchers, or is it just Michigan's going to run it down their throat and they really don't need a ton of passing volume?
That's what they will do unless the game stays close for whatever reason. I am not expecting it to.
Does that make Maryland obviously a pretty tough situation, of course, going against Michigan's defense? Tagovailoa, Jarrett, any of these guys is just volume centric, or is it just a really ugly spot?
Tagovailoa projects fairly well. I want to say fairly. And basically you could use him in tournaments. There's just other value options like Yurkovich that are a lot better than him. So I don't know if you necessarily need to get there. Plus they're underdogs, but Tagovailoa, he's averaging over 300 yards per game. Volume's certainly not an issue for him. And Michigan quietly plays fast too. They're not a slow team. They're very run heavy, but they're definitely not slow. Tagovailoa has very clear options in the receiving game now. They've lost so many players that Raheem Jarrett's just going to be force fed. Chigo Conquest had a much larger role, and Carlos Carrier is now the wide receiver too. So I like Jarrett. He's a decent run back if you're running Haskins, just a little correlation play there. You can't use any of the runners, but Tagovailoa, I would say, is an outside consideration in tournaments.
Anything else from this game?
I don't think so. I think that's just about everything. Anything that you thought of?
No, not really. I think that we kind of know Michigan's going to run the ball. They're going to be effective. I think that Maryland, if you're running a bunch of lineups, I think you could stack up the passing attack and just hope that volume gets, you have Haskins on the run back. I don't mind that. Certainly wouldn't be my number 1 favorite thing to do though. All right, let's get to the last game. We'll take a couple questions and we'll bounce on out of here. And again, if you guys got questions, stay tuned. Of course, Matt, you can find him on Twitter, Matt_Gajeski. You can find me at JazzRazDFS. A lot going on in the sports world today. We got Nebraska 10-point underdog going into Camp Randall, 43-point total. Not a great game. Scott Frost is he can't be killed. He'll be back. Where's Nebraska at? Martinez, tough matchup. Wisconsin's playing a lot better. I assume you don't like a lot on Nebraska's side.
I do not. I would not play anybody on this Nebraska team. They rotate all their receivers. I guess Ramir is a decent play at running back, but he's going into a very difficult environment here. just not one that has a lot of interest for me.
Anything from the Wisconsin side? Again, they are playing better, but a 43-point total is still a 43-point total.
Braylon Allen, the 17-year-old freshman, he's receiving a monstrous workload. Nebraska plays solid run defense, and the total here is so low that so many better plays project better than him. But the volume's right there. He's been incredibly efficient. So Braylon always needs to be considered.
All right. We got a couple minutes left. And I do want to say right after this, you don't want to go anywhere. We've got Neil, we've got Greg, NFL Tournament Strategy Show, a fantastic watch and listen, no doubt about it. But let's take a couple of these. If you guys got them, we'll try to get to as many as we can. We had a question. Should I pair Jerkovich with Flowers or use Shipley as a one-off and Jerkovich would be by himself?
I think it depends entirely on the tournament. I think both are viable.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, obviously you've got the correlation. This is a different type of question. I mean, I know it's tough. We don't do a lot of showdown, but if you were just playing Michigan State, Ohio State on the showdown slate, is there a favorite captain? Would it be one of the pass catchers for Ohio State? Would it be maybe Trayvon Henderson?
I play all the showdowns, every single one.
See, this guy, I should have known.
What?
That's some real sick shit. I respect it, but my God.
Trevion Henderson's my most owned captain there. I have some Jaden Reed. I even have some Mayan Williams for game script getting out of hand. But man, these showdowns are awesome.
No, they're great.
A little hack for you guys. Every single showdown overlays. Play them. They all overlay. I actually just reminded myself to enter some more. So thanks, Ben. I would have forgotten.
You can thank chat. That's what we do. We appreciate you guys. Chat.
Some of these contests aren't even half full.
Okonkwo from Maryland. Any thoughts?
I think he's tournament viable. I'd rather get up to Jarrett.
Quick question on FanDuel. We've got TJ Pledger or Abaconda? Abaconda. Okay. There we go. Smith, Njigba, and Olave, or Wilson and Xavier Hutchinson? I mean, if you're going the first one, you obviously have to have Stroud, but
I would play the first one.
Yeah. Do you think this is interesting. Do you think Armstrong will be lower owned on FanDuel compared to Pickett? I would assume just because we don't know, right?
I think on both platforms.
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
What happened?
Nothing. I just found some of my lineups that have a ton of salary left over after I reran some stuff with Turner. So
interesting.
Take a look.
And for what it's worth, just to go back to one thing real quick with this Penn State spread, it has dropped 4 points still. So again, I don't know exactly what that means with Clifford, but it was at 18 when we started the show. It is sitting at 14. I'm staring it straight in the face right now. So take that for what you will. I think it's just
the cowards taking the other side of it.
Smart. Driving that down. Wayne or Charlie Kohler for DK Cash?
Who is the first one?
Wayne.
Oh, for Pitt, I would play Wayne.
And really, so again, I just round up construction here. We've got a couple of minutes. You've mentioned it's a type of day with so much salary relief at backs. You see yourself getting to running backs potentially heavily at the flex.
Mostly running back flex, not all, but quite a bit.
Real quick, I know it wasn't on there, but Pierre asked, do you have any thoughts on UCLA USC? It's only on FanDuel.
Oh, Jackson Dart is a great play. Taj Washington's a great play. They're so voluminous in their
baby. All right.
Man, like Taj Washington, 15 targets last week. Gary Bryant, 12. Like Dart is more mobile than Slovis. He's way too cheap. UCLA on the other side, and Britton Brown's questionable. If he's out, Zach Charbonnet like rounds out this little mini stack really well. We have a minute left, but I mean, if you can play it, go for it.
No, that's good. And right now, not friend of the show. He's our producer, Tyler. I was going to say friend of the show. You are a friend. Putting our betting cards on the screen. So you guys just get a little peek at what we've got behind the glass. That is yours. Obviously, you have a lot more plays than me. You get these plays early. You beat those lines. And we talk about that every Wednesday on the Betting You podcast. So we've got that. Our final question, a perfect way to go on out. We'll ask you about your boys. Jack Cohn, anything if you're going to play Austin?
I would not play Jack Cohn.
Okay. Sorry, Notre Dame. That's win some, you lose some. Again, guys, appreciate you hanging with us. I know 14 games in an hour is a little difficult. We do the best we can. We try to get through as much. If you have questions, there's our handles right there. Hit that like button on your way out. Enjoy the games today. Good luck. We hope someone takes something down. Tweet us when you do. We'll see you guys next Saturday, same time, same place.